and the people who were like watching the reading found that unrealistic to the point of comical. They thought, oh, we thought it was a comedy because people were quoting Shakespeare. And I'm like, yeah, I never hang out with people who randomly here casually, like except for all the time. Put that mic so that you're sure to be covered.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Tilt it so you're covering his blue chair.
Yeah,
Going.
Boop, boop, boop,
Yeah,
boop.
perfect.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we got that out of the way. All right. Well, I don't know how many devices we're on right now. It's
All of them.
several dozen different things. Yeah. So
Talk to this one for close up. Michael Cattrall, everyone, author of the Four Horsemen. We're just gonna, I guess, like roll this back and forth.
Yeah, we're gonna get her going in each direction. So, yeah, technical challenges are always good fun. As is, the way of life. Well, it seems like you two didn't have any technical challenges while you were recording. It seemed like you ripped fat through the Four Horsemen so quickly. It was like a week, and then it was like, you got a few lives in, saw behind the scenes a little bit, and then it was like, okay, it's done. Like,
well, I mean, we've had the benefit of experience of like lives together already, for a few different entities. And so when it came time for this, it was like, great, this again, which is great to kind of cut past the kind of like, how do we manage this and get right to the acting values of it, I think the story really too, Yeah. And that comes down to like creating a schedule that makes sense for both of us, that like maximizes figuring out what parts we could do separately so that we can get as much time consistently together doing the important parts of the duet. So
parts that we really were together.
Yeah.
And I think it was really fun because there's not many scenes where they're actually apart. So, scheduling conflicts must be like incredible on this. Because I think there's like 2 scenes where the gals go off, and then I think there's like 1 or 2 where,
and there's like when they have their flashbacks about how they got to where they were. Those are, but even sometimes there would be a female or a male character that would be part of that, but there were fewer of them in book 1. There were fewer of those parts apart in book 2.
Yes.
Book 2 was a lot more together.
Yeah. And I think like also like in the beginning scene, it's very hectic, right? There's a lot going on. And I think one of the things that actually led so powerfully to both of you was like, immediately just by hearing who's speaking. And it was also, I always find it fun when like you brought the character to life and it's like, okay, so I had this idea of they'll sound like this, and then actually hearing them like come to life is just awesome. And I know that you both had to like go into the accents of each of the characters. Like, what made you pick the accents that you picked for them?
Let's start with mine.
Yeah, I mean, it was.
We start with Maya.
We start with Maya. I know. So let's start with
more about Maya.
It seems to be Maya, at least on my TikTok area. But I think your direction was kind of like what you were looking for. We had some of our own ideas, not knowing kind of what you were basing everything on and what your feel was for it. So your input was so important into kind of shaping how we went with it. But even then, like how you wrote her really lent itself to that Southern accent but really kind of in almost like a not a very genteel Southern accent, but kind of a more, kind of scrappy, she's in control because she's a captain of a ship, she's a captain and stuff, but like, she's just kind of like, get it done, and I think also this, like, what I love about it is, like when she's negotiating, and she just kind of like rolls into things and like, oh, come on now, don't you think? And I think it just really lends itself to her personality that you created. And then I feel like when I add the accent in her voice, it just, with the writing, she just is so alive. And I love that about all the characters.
Oh, I find it so is like by sort of conventional tropes, Maya would be like the Barbary paradigm, but that she's Southern, and maybe that everyone from her world is like, we've done that a little already. We've met the crew of her ship before she recalls her ship. It's a spoiler for 2, I guess. But it's
very early. Yeah. I think we got that in like the first sample. So
yeah. It's like if the Southern Confederacy had like had brigadiers off their coat, like it's a whole other world that combines elements that we know that we associate with like Southern accents, Southern America, but with like Caribbean pirates, or however that works out. That makes me really curious to know. But also that we'll get a chance to play in that world at some point. Yeah.
Well,
It's up to you.
we'll see. Yeah.
Please play in that world at some point where everybody's Southern pirates all around. Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely got some good parts coming up, but yeah. So like, well, Walter's really our one too. Right?
Well, it's thankful that like he's a version of like when you said it when I wasn't sure exactly where you wanted to go with it about it being like, oh, he's like Northern England and like all these Northern English dudes, but I also kind of I played with the accent a little bit in terms of like how far it went because it's not exactly but so I took a few features of what would be something. It's a bit more of a blend of a bit more Southern accents with like a couple of key vowels for what people would identify as a more Northern accent, but not precisely that, to make it kind of its own thing. But for him, it's like he doesn't say much. I kind of noticed that you kind of realize that as you go into it, and you actually physically hear how much more talkative everyone else is. But then when he does talk, he's like he comes forth with like 2 really intense paragraphs of like when my life was horrible. And you're like, okay, Walter, all right, and then with Peter, it's like he's kind of like this. In a way, it makes sense for him to be a general North American accent, because out of everyone there, he's the one who's like, what's going on here, and the rest of them are in their thing. So there's a certain sense to everyone else being in what is relative to our accents, or most listeners being North Americans, but that him being that guy. I love the fact that it's the North American who's like, what's going on? And everyone's like, in order to help him out, and he kind of figures his way through.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting of like, well, Walter and Desari are kind of very similar. Like the two of them, like they're very quiet at the beginning. They're very reserved. They've gone through a lot. And it's also interesting as you go along, the like opening up of the two of them as characters. Like Maya, I think we painted a very pretty picture as soon as Walter's trying to get out of, the first place that he appears in. And you're like, okay, this is Maya's personality. And then Peter kind of follows quickly after. But Desari and Walter are almost developing their personalities as they go, which I felt was like great is the two of you, because we've got established characters. We've got also new characters that are weaving, and then all the fun little backstory parts. Where they're like backstory parts that like as you listen to them, as you read them, you were like, okay, I'm now gonna like this is gonna change all of the things that we've had before. Is there like scenes of that you were like, okay, this is
I didn't feel like that with Desari, because I feel like how you wrote her from the beginning for me, I felt like really informed her personality, because especially with this accent, it's very kind of has a seriousness to her, kind of an intensity that you're going to find later that comes out that you're not really sure where it's going. But I feel like because of that accent, it lends to that kind of mystery that is surrounding her, that you don't really know that much about her yet, but that you want to find out, right? Because
and this is the two stuff that we meet the elementals, and we find out that everyone on the water plane is like, no, she's incredibly important. You didn't know. She's never said it. We don't hear that about it from her, which is very telling. Yeah, exactly. It's like she would never say, at least I'm a big deal. Yeah.
It's also interesting. It's fun when like in like person, because when you were doing mine, it's like sit back a lot, and then when it's like sorry, it's like okay, well, then there's like a poison into it.
100%. Oh yeah, it's definitely like a physical thing for sure. Yeah. It's like Maya's all like, come on, let's go, and here, let's gonna do this and that there. But like exactly, Desari is very kind of poised, and she's very still.
Yeah.
There's a stillness about her that's very serious.
Well, that's happening because we did a lot of that live. You got feedback from people watching what was happening, and I know that like I do try to gesticulate while I'm narrating, or I try to. And I'm on the stool too, so I'm not leaning back. I'm kind of like as much as I can, kind of gesticulate. I know it helps keep me vocally alive as well too, but I don't think about what I look like narrating. But until you start getting feedback from people being like, oh, like he's moving his hand, or the expression, or if you've ever like if I would sometimes or by myself, like TikToking by myself, and it freezes, if it does the thing where I forget to move the slide over and it freezes, and I look up after a little bit because I'm not paying attention to my phone, and I'm like, And like, when was I making that face when I was just like talking, you know? Because I don't realize how, you know, I just don't think of it, how animated we get, and, you know, but doing it this way and kind of having the visual be an element of our storytelling, and in terms of how we are acting off of each other, makes the whole thing a lot more visceral and exciting and fun, and all those, like, it adds an element that is, and yet another element that is entirely different from how this game usually is, just being alone in the dark, and, you know, and reading to your iPad.
Has there been anything that the two of you have caught one another out now? Because like you're live duetting together and you're just like, this tick, I know that this is going to happen now. Like, because you must pick out like quite a bit of like, well, this other person's doing something, and then you're like, all right, so he's probably going to do this, and like you're kind of prefacing of what's going to happen, or you picked up
We
on
developed a really kind of unspoken way of, like, if a random voice comes up, of being like, this is yours.
Yeah.
Like we sometimes will step on each other and be like, oh no, go ahead. But more often than not, like 9 times out of 10, I don't know what we're doing. I don't know how that happens. I'm just like, one of us does it, the other, and I kind of see it out of the corner of my eye. I'm like, okay, or we're just on the same wavelength about we're switching off or something. Or, you know, when it comes to random voices, particularly, I'm a big fan, and I do this in general too. Like, if a voice is unattributed to male or female, I always, you know, like there's in certain martial environments too, when there's battle scenes and things like that, about making everyone a dude. But when, as often as possible, try to have it not be the case. And in worlds like all these worlds are, where like soldiers are male and female, it's important to keep mixing that up, keep the representation equal there. You know?
And it could be also fun because then it could throw a curveball in there, right? Like some of the things that we have here is like Walter and Peter are like, I don't want to do that, and then Desari and Maya are like, well, we're gonna go do this. Come on, guys! And it's like the back and forth of the ball, and the strengths that they play to. Like I really loved like the negotiation that Maya has is of course a ton of fun, but also Peter has this unsurety with him of like he is our main character because he's asking so many questions. He's exploring this world in so many ways. I know that we've got like so many characters in so many places. Like so behind the scenes there have been so many accents and like placements for everything. And I know we went through it with 10 Realms a lot. How has that been with all of like the gambit of accents? Are there some where you're like, okay, like talk me through this accent, or like where is this going? And then you have to go back and forth to decide where it's going to be, how it's going to be placed, that kind of thing.
Well, for again, this is book 2 stuff, but it's real, and it's going to be out. It's out next week, right? It's out soon. Yeah. But for the first plane, I think we both thought, this feels British. This feels like,
with the writing, how you kind of wrote it and things that you would say.
And the towns all sort of felt that way, and that felt like a good place, like a solid place to start, because they're both so familiar with. The second one, I think we went in thinking it was going to be maybe something more Slavic, but then when we talked about it, it was like, no, the names were definitely leading towards something more Asiatic, but it's not exactly that. It's not. And this was, again, this was the same question with 10 Realms, where everyone is magically speaking the same language. There are no thick accents, and over the thousands of years that anyone was there, any regional accent would have been eradicated. So we did have to kind of create a version of an accent, a very light one, that sort of hinted at what we understand as to be probably Chinese mainland. And we had to kind of like, it's like this, and try to be subtle with it, and then kind of work off each other but that's the thing, is like we established it, but as we're going along too, we're listening to like, oh, that's what that is, and kind of growing it as we went through the book. It's such that because we'll be back on that plane at some point, those will seem like an old friend, like, oh, we're back on this one as well too. And it seems like the next plane we're going to, I think we've decided, is the material plane.
Yeah, well,
And that's where we went. The end of
see where spoilers are saying. But no, like because we jump around like quite a bit through different places, which is a lot of fun. I think that like when we talked about it, we were okay, where are we going in the future?
Because we had to sort of like plot out where we were and save someone's for down the road, or if we were in Maya's world, that answers that question, you know. at some point, if or something you haven't even written yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've got a lot to go through, so that's gonna be fun.
It's not as much of a pantser, so
Oh, let's see where it goes. I have some
there's
idea.
a degree of there's like jazz degree of panther, which is on the far end of the spectrum, a jazz. Sitting or walking later.
Yeah.
Euglin, sort of a panther, but he thinks a lot about things too,
He's got his beat by day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's different kinds of within. Sure, I mean, just talking about.
No. Well, it's also kind of like I would almost like equate it to like how much all of the prep that you both do for all of it, but then also like there's the prep which gets everything sorted out, but then also how you were saying, okay, well we can bounce it back and forth, and it's almost like in that flow that you're just like going like so quickly back and forth. Like again, I was just so impressed with how like fast it went through because it was like it felt like 3 days and like the one was done. It was like oh, and then the both of you are just like, oh well, like we're going back to other gigs now. Like we got completely like ourselves. But no, I think it's been so much fun. But the question we just got was, how much do you two mess with one another to create bloopers?
Oh, I don't know if we intentionally. No, we don't. They happen so naturally. It's not necessary to kind of provoke it, But I mean, and I think this is an element of recording live as well, and because even when it's not live on TikTok, when we're in Discord using that as our foundation, there's us and there's a couple people there, and Dawn is there as well too.
Yeah.
Shout out to Dawn Chan.
Yeah.
And I always found this, as opposed to if I'm by myself and there's no one listening or watching, I stop and go back a lot. And I don't know if that's like a measure of like me being like a perfectionist, kind of, sort of, not exactly that, because I'm not really that, but like more, I'm using one set of muscles. And then whenever I'm live, I find myself going for pages more often for like much longer stretches than I would otherwise. And I think it's because knowing that I'm being watched engages a slightly different neural pathways for me, and kind of makes me light through things that I might go back and change otherwise. And so I think part of the reason why I went so fast is that we're both kind of in that mode where it also, like, if you're also bouncing back and forth, the burden of carrying the entire thing is distributed in such a way that we're just kind of going back and forth and being okay with whatever's happening. And we're not punching and rolling. We're not stopping, re-recording. It's open.
Exactly. So we can actually make changes if we want to. Or say, you said like, I want to go back and do that again.
Yeah.
Before. Not often though, but I really think it's because we're both actors. We both do theater, have done theater. And that literally, especially when we're on TikTok or like when we're in Discord and have people there, it's really like you have an audience. And it's like raises the level somehow. I mean, I know that I've even like, when I've been on doing TikTok stuff, it's the same thing. Like you don't stop as much because people are watching and whatever. But anytime that I thought, oh, I don't know about that, and I've gone back and I'm like, oh no, that was fine. Like a lot of times, you're like, oh no, that was right. That was good. Like you get in your head and you start overthinking it, and it's just so. I think
for that so often when you have an open role and you have 3 takes. The first one was the best, but you were like, no, I can nail this hard, and sometimes it is. I mean, what I get completely caught up on, the Naga to Nata, Nata.
Oh, the Naga to Nata. Something it was like it's Naga to Naga Nata.
Naga. I don't even know.
It was funny because it was Eric's thing, and then it was like it kept on making me think of like Jez has this weapon, the Naginata.
Yeah.
I hope. I'm not going to go say that one again. But like, and it's the thing of it. I was like, wait, which book? And it's just the 2 of them, and I'm like, there's all of this confusion that gets like thrown in there.
Yeah, pollination and spermian.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I don't feel that way.
But like, so what was there anything that I threw in there that you were like, wow, this sentence, like we can, like, is it tongue twister that I got you on, or is there?
There is. There's a word, isn't there?
Well, I mean, we
So this is where we find out where they've been cursing me all this time.
Limos Lemos. I always got caught up on. I kept wanting to say.
Yeah.
I don't even know which it is right now. I was saying Lemos. A handful of my pickup.
That's understandable.
So I was going to say about Limos. Limos. Was that even if it's that Limos has those bent or and what was the name of the gnome? Hedwig. Is the other side of Maya's kind of the bartering. So even if it wasn't one of my main characters, trying to think what other.
Something in book 2, like something was like, maybe it's just the pronunciations of like places, because like what would happen is like Maya would say it first.
Right, Atera.
Oh.
Atera. We're like, it's like a Rebbe, Atera. But Maya said it first, and people go, Atera. Like, I guess that's the name of the city.
Yeah. So we have to kind of look through that in the future and
Yeah,
just go by whoever says it first.
Or just that'll be one of the scenes of you've been saying this wrong the entire time. Yeah. No, like it's the thing of like sometimes as you go through and an accent could change everything, pronunciation, and so there could be
Well, I always think about that too, and this comes up a lot in Gamelit, where people are reading the name of a place for the first time on a notification screen, and they're like, particularly if they're isekai from someplace else, and they're seeing it written out.
Yeah.
How do they know how it's pronounced? How does everyone know it's pronounced consistently? It might be like a musical theater thing where everyone suddenly knows all the dancing. But like, there's very little room to play with that sometimes. But I always think about how that happens, and however it's a bit of a convention of audiobook that for the sake of consistency and probably like it's a level of storytelling that you have to address it in order for people to not think, oh, they're pronouncing that inconsistently, or so that, but at least we're on the same page about the major names of the world that they're in.
I think actually one of the things I learned from 10 Realms was actually, okay, keep the name simple. The KISS rule is so good. And like the thing was it was like I think we would go through, like we'd have like a list of just like, okay, this needs, what is that? And I was like, oh yeah, I thought I was being cool, and now none of us know how to say that. And but now it's like with Four Horsemen is making sure that everything's pronounceable. At least I hope so. On the other side, but then there is like stuff there's like, okay, what is this? Like the few words here and there. For some reason we were saying the sorry, and then some reason someone said in my real life Desiree, and then I couldn't get that name out of my head, and I was like, no, stop saying this name, because like it's like messing me up a little bit. No. Yeah. It's don't take it. It's like throw the word to the side.
No, I won't, because you're Spanish. The fancy people side. That's how you say it.
Yeah, and it works so well. It's like, I'm sorry, I'm just seeing all of the chit chat stuff there.
Any other?
Meanwhile, I don't know how you came up with the story. Like, how did this get into your head?
That's what I want to know. So there was, I don't know, just the scene of the 4 of them together, and it was just like, you know how in like Marvel they had the after movie scene, and it's like the 4 of them hanging out. So it was the thing of like, okay, so we have one guy who's like, okay, everything's gonna be cool and like relax, and he's sitting back. Another guy who's like, kind of the hobgoblin in the corner, and he's eating all the food. And then you have like, now I'm going to say Desire all the time. But she was like, like being like, she was like eating, like being like, woman, ladylike in the way that she was doing it. And then you have like Maya like kicking the door, and then she had like a bag of loot, and she had a gun, and it was smoking. She's like, we should probably leave. And that was literally how the scene of like, okay, well, how do these four characters work together? Walter was like, okay, well, he's going to be strong, but he's the strong silent type. Peter is, okay, I'm with this bunch of crazy people, and I've got to try and understand what's going on. But this is also fun at the same time, and he gets a little bit wilder as we see as it goes on.
Yeah.
And Dasari is just like, hey, Desiree, God, I'm gonna mess this up now. I've cursed myself. She was like, okay, like I'm with this band of idiots, and I have to make sure that they get to the point. And so she was like shivvying them around, and then it was like, okay, how do we get to that point?
Yeah.
Where do these 4 come from? And I was like, they're going to be from very diverse places. and then we just work our way backwards. And usually that's how I go, is like one scene of those characters being together or doing something, and then how do we actually start them on that journey? So now that scene will probably actually never come to fruition because now
Right.
their journey is changing.
Well, but the essence of that is every scene for them together.
Mhm. Yeah.
You want to pull that? Someone is asking for a fern. You want to pull that fern
Like you want to
closer? Yeah. Someone say you're right. Who was that? Yeah. Chris Bass was saying we needed a fern. There's another one across the room, but we're not gonna there.
More greenery for
Yeah,
everyone.
more greenery. There we go.
Ah.
There is. I mean, we were sort of between two ferns because there's one across. Some. Here's a question for you. I kind of realized it was when I was writing a post about it. I guess I was sort of anticipating it being something else when we were first talking about it. But is this in your head gamelit, or is it just progression fantasy?
That's a good one. So because we have stat screens with the gear and such.
Yeah, and with all the things you're buying and all those, and the card that they have that updates,
Yes.
with how much they save quests.
So I would say it's gamelit because
Yeah.
like they do have cores and such, but it's
Yeah.
not like they have a strict internal system for doing it. It's just I found it was so much easier to be like, okay, here is the information of
Yeah.
the gear. And
Mhm.
especially like actually it made it a lot easier with Maya of like, okay, when she's doing negotiations on stuff. And then it also shows off their skill of when they're crafting something. We get to
Yeah.
see a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I actually really like how we were able to bring in like sewing and tailoring with Maya has been
Mhm.
actually really fun.
Yeah.
And like figuring out the little parts. I think it's later on, but we have some really cool stuff that they start making together.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, like this is not where we'd think this would come from.
Totally, that's so cool.
So
Well, I remember, and then you wrote a lot of that in 10 Realms as well, too.
Mhm.
That it wasn't necessarily about story; it's about development. But it was these scenes where their characters get really invested in the intricacies of their craft,
Mhm.
of their
Yes.
and about how that reflects. It's a meditative thing that they
Mhm.
get kind of lost in, and that ends up being a key aspect of where they're heading with their purpose, with their lives, with all
Mhm.
those things. But but the scene itself is purely just about crafting.
Yeah.
It's about the like how do I build this? How do I make this thing?
Mhm.
And how do I improve by improving my crafting, improving myself
Mhm.
at this,
And
which I think about all the time in terms of like when
Mhm.
we're sitting in the booth and crafting and spending the entire day producing. It's a weird thing. Like so many other performance mediums, they rehearse and then perform. Spend a lot of time rehearsing, then it's a little bit of performance.
Mhm.
But we're producing product all day long.
It's almost the reverse for you too.
Yes.
Like especially when you're like, okay, so I think that you had a couple of days of getting ready for everything, and then it was just like where you were in and
Yeah.
off, right?
Well, we prep and have that conversation, and it's necessary, but that's still like it's not as much, not as much time spent. Yeah, it's crucial, because we can't have all those conversations about what's happening in this world, or without knowing the big picture.
I will say, like watching you two like do the story, it seems so much fun. Like because you have all of the interactions of the two of you together, great friends, but and also as you're doing the story, you're just like, but it's also like you flow really well. And actually, there was a question here we had. Worse, how did the two of you sync up? Is there like some days where you're like okay, we're really synced, or is there something that you do to like get together, or is it just flows? You're just
It just
It
Yeah,
just works, I mean, I think, like I said before, this is not, it's not our first or second or third or fourth rodeo,
Mhm.
and that helps a lot. But I even think right from the beginning of doing it, and I think a lot of that is like, yeah, like you're saying before, we were both actors, we do theater,
Mhm.
but it's not by accident that I think ended up on this project together and other ones too. We just click, just work well together, which is fantastic.
I mean, I think that's part of the, I mean, it's,
Put that back on yourself.
oh, it's okay. It's
I'll
like
split
part
this
of
one.
it. It's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's part of it. It's that whole, I mean, it's so much because we don't get to do that a lot. And because a lot of the duets that I do, and I know that you do, like we'll call them, like Neil has done it for me, is call them dead duets, even though they're supposed to be, because they're just not, you're by yourself in a room and you're anticipating what someone is supposed to say.
How they
said it.
to what you think
They think how they say it. Yeah. It's just, I mean, I at least will sometimes, let's say a lot of duets now are in romance. So I will request that I go last and I have the other person's lines. And I will take the time, which is more time than most people will give it.
Yeah.
And I will listen to all their lines and act off of their lines because it's just how I just prefer it. I want it to sound good and authentic and as best as possible. But it's
Yeah.
still like at the end of the day, I'm sitting there doing by myself and whatever. But so whenever we have a chance to work together like that in live, we're just like, and when it's over, it's like a play.
Yeah.
You get that depression. There's like a down tick. We're like, oh.
Yeah.
You're like, so big strength.
Where's my partner?
Yeah.
There is something about, it's like with live theater. I mean, there's something about working off of each other and performing together. And it just, for me, it makes the characters just so much more real.
Mhm.
So much more real. Every time.
And I think it is like, art is never made in a vacuum kind of situation, right? It is always, it is back and forth, and the resonance of that, you can see that so much in theater is like, okay, like, you have two people having a conversation. It's very rare that you have soliloquies in anything, though we did have some Shakespeare here earlier. But
Some prep Shakespeare.
it's that thing of the back and forth can be so strong that it's sometimes like, okay, well, like knowing stuff, like having seen the two of you working together, I'm like, okay, well, this scene might work well, this thing might work well. Like those pieces of like, then it starts to craft all of that together. So it's not just, okay, well, we're writing a book and hopefully it turns into an audiobook. It's writing a book and thinking of the audiobook and working, okay, what ways can I frustrate or, like hopefully like have you enjoy it? Yeah.
Or you meant to use, but yeah.
But then like back and forth can be a ton of fun.
Yeah.
And then also, so okay, I know that we know a live duet is, but I know that sometimes like people are like, okay, what does that actually mean? And I think what you said actually helps that down the kind of, okay, here's the other kinds of duets you can have. So would you like to explain just for the audience?
Yeah. Well, there's okay. We'll start with solo narration, which is solo narration, which is one narrator alone, in the booth or whatever recording. And that I'm going to relate all that to collaboration. We call it solo, but it's not really, because you are really effectively collaborating with the author. You might be collaborating with a producer who's working on it with you, who you can bounce ideas off of, depending on what the setup is. If you're working in indie or you're working with a publishing company or whatever, there might be other people you could talk to about it. So you're not truly alone, and it's always the narrator and the author. And so even if you've never laid eyes on each other or have sent an email back and forth, it is still a collaboration. Then there's split POV, which is one chapter is narrated by one narrator, and is usually from the either first person or third person informed point of view of a character, the main character. And in that those narrators do all the voices in that chapter, even if it's the voice of the other narrator's main character. In that other chapter, they will have their point of view, the character from their point of view. That's split POV. Then there's dual narration, yes. And that's DUAL, not DUEL. It's people say a lot, which is hilarious, like dual narration. Take 10 paces, turn around. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it feels that way, but it's not. It's DUAL, yeah. And then there's duet, which we were doing a live duet where they're simultaneously recording. That can sometimes be in the same studio. We use Discord as the bridge platform to communicate with each other. And also because Discord is on our desktops and is running the audio of our booth. So it's the best way to hear. But we're also, I always wonder about latency because we're geographically so far apart from each other. But we just both work on what we're hearing by the time it reaches us.
Yeah.
And I think, and then Dawn tweaks that all together, probably to sound a little more smooth. And so and the other duet, which I've taken to calling dead duet, but only in contrast to live duet, is when you have a chapter from your character's point of view. So you're reading the narration, which is all the other text, and your characters, and you just leave a space for other narrators' characters.
Yeah.
Like you do a click or something, and then that's your chapter. Those are your POV chapters. And then for other ones, when it's not your chapter, you would just read those lines of dialogue. You'd be sitting there, be like, yes, no, Yes, baby. Usually romance.
Yeah.
And then someone takes all those and plugs that into the other narrators. So again, it's the same thing where it's the same product where it's, all the male characters are one narrator or female or the other, or two males or three males or harem, right? But again, you're making a supposition about, for dialogue in particular, that you're reacting off of what you think you're reading it in front of you. So you know what they're saying. You don't know how they're saying it. So it's that much more depth.
Yeah, the tonality of it, like, okay, not matching and such. But
Yeah.
that's going to be extremely technically like heavy work of like whoever's doing the mastering of like, okay, I'm going to plug this in here, plug this in here, plug this in here.
Yeah. On a certain level, it's also kind of like done with my chapter,
Yeah.
You do like 5 lines and then you're great.
I mean, sometimes like I do duet also for with John Perhala for David North, and we had this whole series that we're doing together. And I just do my lines for John, but I worked with him for so many years and I know him so. I mean, I can imagine it'd be similar to you. Is that I kind of know how he would say something. You know what I mean? Like when you've really worked with someone a long, long time, it's. I think it's easier to put those together.
Yeah.
Because he does all the editing for the whole series, which is I can't even think about how he does all that, but it's like my God. So in those instances, I feel very lucky because then I feel like they'll go more easily together because you know the person really well. But most of the time, you're not working with someone that you have worked with all the time, or like I think I've done like 50 books with John. So it's like mostly it's just for me, usually romance. He's a new guy here, new guy there, whatever. So it's just it's not always easily done.
Yeah. But I like the idea that you have of like, okay, well, you get everything and then you can work off of like all the first pickups.
Yeah.
That sounds like so much smoother to me. But outside perspective, I get to listen to the audio at the end and like bits in between, and I'm like, okay, this is pretty fun. Which is like usually like the only time I would get to hear it is at the very end too. And now with the allowance of like TikTok and Discord, well, we were doing it with 10 Realms, but I think that was before TikTok was even a thing.
Well, and I think in that case, I was just recording, not all the time, but sometimes in your Discord channel.
Yeah.
Just to like keep people informed of what was happening with that recording process. And and I think also for reasons that we don't have to talk about now, it was about like, here's what's happening with the series now. So people keep your fan base connected with I think like a part of what I think we keep hearing from people here is that even with mistakes and things like that, and the bloopers, that seeing how the product is made that they may eventually buy, the behind the scenes.
So many people. Like I have a couple of moderators who are on when we're doing it, and we have like it depends on the day. We'll have between maybe 50, 200. We'll have it's a wide variety, but it's always like, what are they reading? What book is this? And so they're always constantly posting. For Horseman, Michael Chatfield, like what I mean, like. Always posting. So I would be very surprised.
Which I very much appreciate. Yeah.
Which I would be very surprised if people from TikTok did not buy.
Yeah.
I would be very surprised because we had like a really good session a couple times where we had like 200 people hanging out with us. And, and again, thankfully my wonderful moderators that I love so much.
Yeah, I wouldn't
keep going.
See anything here, Felicity. And you were there, and
Liquor of Shadows was there.
Liquor of Shadows was there. Chris Bassett.
Aw.
I just got
see, there have been multiple people waiting for the book to be finished too. So book 2 is up for pre-order, right?
I think it's over.
It's done. Yeah.
I think they even had like, we were even talking about that you have a Patreon, or what do you have? It's a Ream?
Yeah.
Like to find you or to go to your website and
Actually, book 2, audiobook you can buy right now on the website. Yeah.
Book 2, you hear that? Book 2 is out on the website. You have him? Anything? Sorry. We're gonna like, I don't know how that happened. Disconnect you, sorry.
So apparently there's a filter on your screen.
Yeah.
Someone
And it was gonna smell, yeah.
Look at that. No, like some other questions that people sent in beforehand.
I want to know real quick. Do you now hear our voices in your head when you write your characters?
Yes.
Yay!
Yeah. Like
I would love that.
one of the things that was interesting is like they kind of their personalities were the way that they were, but the how they'll say something. I was like, okay, I'm like Maya would be a bit more extravagant on this. Walter is going to bring it down here, and it's going to be like a deeper voice. So usually, like people with deeper voice don't say as many words, right? Because it's an overpowering voice. So it'll be the thing of like, I'm like, okay, well, I've got to change up their lines a little bit. But it is also, there is a scene in, I think it's book 3 that, oh, was it book 3? It's somewhere. But the book 3, and it's Walter and Peter have a conversation. And I was like, the thing of I was like, oh, this is going to be a rough conversation. Like it's really good, but it's also an emotionally pulling one. And then I was like, oh, this is really interesting here. And then my editor came in, and then she really loves Maya. Maya's her favorite character. So she's actually been watching some of these lives. She's like, yes.
Oh, really? Oh, that's wow. The editor.
Team Maya.
And then Dasari, she was like, she's like, there's a thing where Dasari is great, but people don't question Dasari. And so there's a moment where like Maya and Dasari have a little bit of a conversation, and I was like, this is going to be so good when it's like brought to life because the two of them, the back and forth. Yeah. So that's as much as I will say on that.
Brian's saying here about we're about spoilers, and he's like giving spoilers books down the line.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, there was
Oh, don't worry.
a whole moment in book 2 where you wrote that, I think I told you this, that Dasari says, yeah. I was like, sorry,
Yeah,
saying yes. She said yes.
Wouldn't it was a pickup, right? I think it was a pickup.
Just read it, yes, yes. And I was like, I'm like, okay, she wouldn't say that, but she said it. So what is going through her head? It gets me there to say it because it was like I had a real struggle. So I just thought, Dasari would not say yeah. He would say yes, always yes,
So that was actually kind of fun thing because the thing is we were told most of the time that we are a creation. The 5 people that we are most friends with, and the people that we like are around with the most, right? So we're going to start to see like some of them will take on the parts that others would say, and also in that scene we like went through it, and I was like, oh, it's because she's trying to throw it off. She's trying to like obscure it also in a way, and then you're
I
like,
found it.
and then you're like, this is like, I don't like it, but no, it's the thing of like staying true to that character, right?
Yeah.
And like that, how the two of you have embodied these characters, and then it's just like, I don't mean to say anything, but what? Which I appreciate, right?
But again, it was like you know her, right? So you wrote that for a reason. So I had to find it, right? Like that's like sometimes you'll see that as an actor also in the theater play, like in a play, you're like suddenly like, she wouldn't say that. He would be like that. And then you'd be like, but it's like that. So I've got to find exactly. I find my roots. 100%.
So like knowing the characters through the representations that you've given, it's like, okay. And when you were like, hey, like, I don't like this, and I was like, I can totally see what you mean, and you like explained like this is the information and how like I'm receiving it. And I was like, oh, that's really good. Damn. But and then I was like, at the same time, like, yeah. It's those fun kind of like catch-ups where it tells you that you've got right into it. We actually had a question about flow.
Sorry, go for it. I was just
no. You're good. You're good. So it kind of actually going back a little bit was what does your flow state with the story feel like, and how does that differ with doing the duet?
Flow state.
So, because like it seems like the two of you're going off of one another so much, and it's like you go like kind of thing, or like I've got a voice for this and that. How is it just like you're going and then you're like at the end of the day like, wow, I'm here, or is it like how does that feel for you?
Well, I love the question about flow state. because this is a bit of a narrator thing. The guy who came up with the concept of flow, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi,
Yep.
is like one of the most
I
hardest
was so
pronounced
happy.
I just had to mention it, but that well, I think it has to do with like we don't realize how much time has passed or how many pages we've done until all of a sudden we've done what was our quota for the day, and we're like, and it's only 1 o'clock for me and it's 9 o'clock for you. We're like, oh, okay, particularly when we're not stopping as much and we're just kind of moving through pages for moments, it's that much more immersive when you actually have someone else's voice that another actor that you're working off of, as opposed to this sort of much more not unnatural but less organic process when you're doing dialogue off yourself all the time. So I just think we kind of drop into it, and particularly like action sequences feel that way. Like the long drawn out, like big set pieces one, like I think one of the cart in book one with the cart coming down the hill from the castle, like that whole sequence, just like, because also like it happened, we both have these moments where the ball is really on the other narrator's court, and the one of it we just like sit back, like she's gonna take this part and run it, and we both just watch and just let it happen while keeping connected to while trying to keep connected to the moments and not going into an autopilot. That's why it is sometimes to go into autopilot when you're narrating, and about how part of the goal or the task is to keep it from happening. When you have someone else when you're working with, it's so much more invigorated with the moment because you're bouncing off of each other.
Keeps you engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also because it's just, like sometimes when you're prepping a book, you're not fully reading every single line. You're like finding out where you are. For me, especially when I know that he's going to be narrating this whole scene, I'm like, oh, this will be great. I'm just going to skim, know what I kind of have to say, like what's kind of happening. But then I just discover it with him as he's telling it, which for me also makes it really fresh, right? It makes it a lot. I'm not like listening to it again because I know what's going to happen. I'm like saving it kind of for that moment, knowing what's happening really in the big picture and knowing like what my part in it is, but then kind of really like listening to him tell it. It's just so much more. It's for me, it keeps me like really engaged, right? It keeps me on the edge. Like, gotta get my cue in. I've got to like, hit my mark and make sure that I'm in there in time. And yeah, it just makes it so much fun. Oh my God.
I think that there's definitely a viscerality to it, like intense eagerness of like, okay, well, I've got this scene and like in the back and forth. But it also is kind of like, as you're saying, I'm like, this is like the best job part because I feel like, hey, I get to someone else to tell me a story while I'm listening to this, and then I get my own story. Because then it's also like then you get the pieces where you're like, okay, I've got this piece and this piece. How the heck is that going to connect? And then the other person is connecting it, and then it just weaves so well together.
Yeah.
I think at this point, when they're like at the point in their relationship where they're like dropping truth bombs on each other about their lives, they're coming from. And Walter, like I mentioned before, Walter's great at this. They're hanging out on the deck of the ship, and Walter's like, my whole family destroyed, and it was like you have an organic reaction to it. We're also, I guess we're kind of near the end, but there's a sound thing I think happening. It does make Marty makes me. It is theater. It's like it's weird because it's like doing theater, but it makes me miss live theater. But it is live theater, but it makes me miss live theater all at the same time.
Because we only have it so rare.
Yeah,
like it's literally your books. So we're like, okay, August, guys, August. We're gonna. When is August coming? When's the next one after that? Like, is it October? Like, is it October? Like, no, November. And I'm like, oh my God, November? Shit. Wait that long?
And it is like a lot of scheduling, right? Because it's just like getting it all together, and like as you said, like like you're finishing at 9 p.m., you're finishing in the afternoon. It's like takes up a good chunk of the day.
Well, I like to note that I think largely Stephanie has adjusted to working on East Coast time.
Yeah, I really do.
Yeah.
Or work like 2 to 10.
Okay. Yeah.
Basically. Yeah.
And when you're here recording in the meeting, like you are actually on ET.
So it was great prep.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think we've got a few more questions. Let's see if.
I think also with the sound of this, I know you guys are getting live like a little bit of latency back and forth.
Here.
Well, it's like we're not getting. these are happening, but they're not quite sending it to people at the same time. But also, we'll take all this and slice all these together.
Yeah.
In that sense, the audio will be, tweaked out. Look at your eyes.
Wow, yeah.
It's made
What's
up.
going on? I think one of the questions was, what's your favorite hydration? Is it always just water? Is it, are you going in there with pop? Are you going in with Arizona? What are you going for your favorite
Well,
hydration?
anything. There'd be too much burping and too much sound
Yeah.
if anything that was actually bubbly. I just drink water, but I have the same water bottle that I've had for years, and it's not a fancy water bottle at all. It's just I found the one after searching for so long that I can sip from without making noise. So it's covered top, because if it was an open top, I will spill it.
Mhm.
There's a glass of water in front of me, but also that I can, if usually between punches, that I can quick grab a sip and but I keep going without it making noise.
Yeah.
So, but just water. I don't bring tea in. I don't bring anything open top like tea into the booth, because like I said, I will spill it.
If you ever need a scalding scene, then that's one way to do it.
That's very organic.
Yeah, sometimes I'll have like a what is it, IV?
Heavy needle.
And
Put in my vein. Yeah.
There's like a hydration little packet that you can use.
Those like hydration
Yeah,
things.
like
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes, but it depends on how much we're like really. Usually, sometimes on our days or like before, I'll try to do it because I know we're like really talking so much.
Yeah.
We get so much finished.
Without stopping.
Stopping.
Yeah. I'm trying to like get rid of hate. If I'm not feeling a need for it, but just even without, just so that I make sure I'm constantly drinking something, because vocalization. So and dehydration really, it's really. This is something I discovered as a narrator about how dehydration isn't just about like feeling thirsty. It's like articulation starts to go and like energy levels flag, and even if you don't feel like you need to be drinking water, especially in an enclosed booth.
one of the things that was interesting we got told was in the army, it was okay if you are dehydrated, you're 8 hours too late.
Yeah.
Because the thing is it'll take so long to get
To get
through.
back, yeah.
But then I guess also with narration, it is also like you need to like wet like all your vocal cords and keep everything going, because like otherwise it's like you can only generate so much spit. So it's interesting of like the technicalities of it all. And I know the two of you use like different tech in the sound booth just to make sure that it's not making as much noise. I think you both use like tablets, right, to read off.
Reading off.
So it's interesting of all of the gear and pieces that come together through this. And have you both built your own sound booths? Did you like get one, or are you just like?
Mine's a studio brick.
Okay.
It's a Spanish made booth, which we assemble, but it's not like a custom booth.
Okay. Yeah. So that was an IKEA fun weekend situation to put that together.
They delivered it to me and they set it up for me.
Oh,
really?
Because I'm so close to Barcelona.
Yeah.
They just drove it over. You know what I mean? They just drove it over and the guy put it together in a day.
Oh, from Barcelona, sure. It's like Philly to New York, right? Yeah. It arrives for the US, for those of us here, it arrives in a massive crate that they more or less, you can hire someone to do it.
Yeah.
But otherwise it's just a crate that they dump on they're like, be ready to receive it. And then crack it open. And then the studio brick is, there are a surprising few number of like prefabricated audio booths, but Studio Brick has these. It's as the name implies, there's all these different panels. It's like level 1, like you drop, and then you drop in level 2, 3, and 4. And you never actually even screw it together. It just gravity makes it all sit together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that kind of makes sense. Like there's one sound booth that I heard that was made, and they don't have screws. Because the screws would actually create a certain kind of resonance that went through them.
Oh yeah.
And it was like even like those kinds of things for sound engineering. It's like you don't think about it, but then it's like to the degree of like there's hundreds, thousands of people listening to this, and like one person will pick out like a little frequency change and be like, oh, like my ear, like what's happening?
So some vocal frequency makes those screws resonate. And also I've heard that I haven't had to move it since I set it up, but that with other booths that you have to screw together. You can unscrew them and screw them back together, but it's never going to join together in exactly the same way if I ever have to move. But whereas the bricks can just
it all form fits.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll do one more check for questions, and I think we are Oh,
Legos.
we have one question.
Like Lego.
One comment was, now I understand why it takes time for an audiobook to be released. Thank you. We do appreciate it. It's because it's scheduling, it's prep, and then it's recording, then there's mastering, and then
Editing is really, especially for duet, is brutal.
Yeah.
It takes a
Yeah.
long time, especially to get it to sound right, the timing right.
And she does multiple.
Yeah,
Mm.
Dawn is perfectionist,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is what you want.
Yeah.
And yeah, she's amazing, but it takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time.
and then really the kind of unsung hero behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All of this. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I think it's almost like 2 times as long to master compared to recording, especially with YouTube like just going through so fast.
Well, and she has to, when whatever small amount of conversation we have also has to be taken out. If like, oh wait, let's do that again. Like that has to be cut out as well too. So it's not just the, as opposed to getting a punch and roll more or less completed edit. It was a lot quicker, a lot smoother. But yeah.
But the cool part about, us doing it on Discord and TikTok is that people can see it before it comes out,
Yeah.
So I mean, hopefully more people will know that we're doing it on TikTok when we're doing it, not all of it, but parts of it.
Yeah.
And then, always on Discord. So I mean, we're in your Discord server, so
Yeah.
it's easily accessible.
Yeah.
And then I think it's also like, I know the sound quality there isn't like as what the master is, but it's still like you can get like all the bits and pieces.
Yeah.
And it is also
100%.
kind of fun hearing the before and the after of like how it can get smoothed out, how it can change, and
Yeah.
just like, and you're like, wow, like it's awesome.
The cool part about it, I think, is like, I've been listening to Travis for years,
Mhm.
right? I mean, and I listen to, all of Kyle Kieran's books, the Shade Slinger or whatever,
Yep.
that series. I listen to Travis do it. And you think I don't go out and buy the book too? Like, I mean, of
Mhm.
course you listen to the audiobook
Yeah.
because you can't catch it all.
Mhm.
There's just no physical way that you can be there for the whole book and listen to the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it's cool to kind of drop in and hear a couple of scenes here and there and have no idea what's going on, so that when you get the book, you're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I remember that. I was there when that
Mhm.
was like, he was going through that,
Yeah,
working
yeah.
on his voice or whatever. And it's kind of cool because I mean, we would also like, we have an idea what we're going to do for a voice,
Yeah.
what we're going to do for a character. But when we get in there, sometimes it's like, oh,
That's not quite right. Yeah.
doesn't quite work, And so we're
Mhm.
sitting there talking about and discussing like, or like, what can we do for this? Or how can we make this a little bit different? Or they kind of go back and forth from this plane to the next. So maybe they kind of have a little bit of an accent of both of those. Or, it's just,
Yeah.
we're working things out. And it's kind of fun to see, I think, the behind the scenes of all of that stuff. So
I mean, it's half of it just on Discord. With how, and we would decide which ones we should do.
Yeah.
Or we'd be like, let's warm up and we'll do that. We'll do the couple chapters here when we feel more comfortable and more in the flow.
Yeah.
We will go to, you guys hear Times Square up there?
yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy that this is New York City. I'm glad I don't live in Manhattan. But I was thinking about this when I was recording Good Guys, Eric's book the other day. I was getting to a chapter. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to read this to everyone because it's completely spoilery. But also, it was like a key moment that I was like, this I want to work on privately. It's like key moments of main characters from different books meeting each other for the first time. I wanted that to be like a private creative moment and make sure I was getting it absolutely right. Distinctions between Clyde and Montana to be like absolutely clear and absolutely consistent. And so that wasn't something to do live.
Right.
But other things in terms of like certain sequences that weren't spoilery that they were happening. Only spoil in the sense of like, well, they're not dead. But to generate enough interest in
Right.
what's happening, to give enough material and to give the essence of the book, while also like trying to entice them to listen to, get the book and listen to the rest of it in their car or whatever.
Yeah. And the last question was, so have I ever gone back and changed a story based on their feedback? So there has been like things where it's like, hey, this line, and like Dawn knows me very well. She's like, yo, you should probably change this because we said it this way and it sounds a lot better like this. And I was like, oh yeah, that does sound a lot better because when it's in the head and when it's actually spoken out,
Yeah.
you can get like so much more. And like I know there was like 2 or 3 lines where it was like the thing of like, I think we went back and did a re-record because it was like, okay, this doesn't
Oh yeah,
actually
yeah,
make
yes,
sense.
yeah. It was about when they came into another room and encountered other soldiers.
Yes.
Yeah, it was like, are they about the four of them? Was it the four soldiers or was it the four horsemen?
Mm-hmm.
That's what. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
the book one thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and we changed it around because then it was like, okay, this is more clear, and it was clear then with the audio and the ebook because it's a lot easier to change it with the ebook than
Yeah.
it is with the audiobook.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's also like because I was actually talking about this with another author, and it's like I would rather change stuff on the ebook
Mhm.
and then have it right on the audiobook. But if the audiobook's already done and there's certain things that like the narrator has had to say, I'm going to keep it that way to be as true as possible. So like the contextual part won't change, but only like the spellings may
Yeah.
change. Just
Right.
to, but it's also the thing of like sometimes it's like, well, you'll read through it and you're like, okay, and then it's all clean, and then it's like someone's like, well, this word's spelled wrong, and it's like, yep, it's because they've auto corrected, and it is like so much better, and it's like, but it's just like how our brains work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've often said that narrators, there's beta readers, right? That were the first people to see it. That narrators are the omega readers because whatever we say, like that's it now.
Yeah.
You want to whisper sync as much as possible, like you're according to what that product ended up being. But also, it's like we do. It is like a last line of editorial.
Dude,
Yeah.
things. I mean, I'm working on a book right now. Fifth pass. It's
Mhm.
done, and I already have like 5 mistakes that
Yeah,
I found.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's
only
so rare to
because-
find something without.
Yes, the brain just works through it already. The brain, it puts in the things that are missing. When you're reading it and it's not there, you can't read the letter that's not there. You know, you can't. Yeah.
Something and it said, I wish I had the tenacity of a spelling mistake on the 10th pass. You know? It's gone through so many. It's like, oh, it's made it actually into the audiobook, and you're just like, how is it going this far? But so,
Oh my God, that's the best. The tenacity of it. Tenth pass. Oh my God, that's so good. So
it works
good.
so well.
It does. I mean, if only we really can appreciate it.
Yeah. Someone will be like, and you're like, oh no. Just in there. Yeah, I think, well, thank you everyone for coming out.
Yeah.
Thank you, Neil and Steph, for making this happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will, we've got, book 2, Planes of
Coming
Terra,
out next week.
Atera, depending on the character.
No, Aetheria.
That was it.
Let's go to Aetheria. Maya says.
Oh, bless Maya. She just comes up and just makes some shit up.
Well, I think she knew the city, and the rest are like, I guess it's called Aetheria.
And then everyone else is like, I don't want to mess with the big guy.
You're not from here, are you?
Yeah. Some clear distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Thank you for all you're doing for the audiobooks. It's awesome. And yeah, we will have many more to come.
And we'll do this again in I don't know, Portugal.
Well, maybe a couple months. DragonCon, maybe.
Well,
Are you going to World Cup?
I don't have any plans to yet, but we'll figure out something. We'll find this.
Maybe Lit RPG convention next year.
Heavy squid.
Yes, yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Hey.
I'm so sorry. I had to blow my nose like 3